Hello, everyone. My name is Karolina Jahomska, and I will be your host for today. I'm a mentor in the international product support team in our technical support team. I'm managing the product specialist team. And in today's session, we'll talk about enhancing your dossier design and performance. And Nahi, would you mind sharing the deck with us? Can you click on the next slide, please? Okay, so today we'll be joined by our leading experts on this topic, and we actually have two presenters today. Anahi Serrano, she's our senior education specialist, and Stephanie Polari, our senior product specialist on the support team. And we also have two special guests from the technology department, Amy Large and Trent Highland, who will present the MicroStrategy product roadmap for the planned enhancements for your dossiers. In today's session, we're going to discuss top 5 strategies to optimize your dossier design and performance. We're going to share some tips and tricks when it comes to identifying those performance issues. And then we're going to hear from our guests from the technology department what is planned for dossiers in regard to new capabilities. And Nahi will also introduce our education courses that will help you master your dossier design and development skills. And in the end, as always, we're going to have a Q&A session with all of our experts here. Again, a quick reminder that this webinar is recorded and will be shared with you for on-demand access. Next slide, please. As always, I would like to remind you that our MicroStrategy 2021 Enterprise Platform is already out, and you are all able to leverage our open architecture, as well as be sure that you'll deliver trusted answers quickly and with sophisticated security and enterprise scale. But most importantly, you can leverage our modern analytics in your dossiers on any supported devices of your choice. Next slide, please. So our modern analytics allow you to create intuitive infographic style analytics solutions for any device in Dossier. You can also leverage enhancements in the data processing technology to enhance your analytics experience. What's also great about our modern analytics is the collaboration capabilities that allow you to share dossiers with your team, put comments in a relevant context that is provided with our shared filters, and also to create bookmarks to save unique views for your personal data analysis. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of new significant dossier enhancements to discover for yourselves in our new MicroStrategy 2021 release. And to analyze your data in a modern way in MicroStrategy Web, Library, Workstation, and on mobile devices. Next slide, please. And with that, actually, I will now hand it off to Anahi, our main presenter. Anahi, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Kara. So what I would like to do today is I'd like to give you a brief introduction to dossiers so that you can see what it is that a dossier is if you haven't had that experience before. And then as we go past this particular set of slides, I'll go into the top tips about how to make sure you have a great performing dossier. So let's start off with a brief introduction here to dossiers. So what's so great about a dossier? We talk about the tool. We want you guys to know all these different features about it because it is a really optimized way of being able to present and consume analytics. When you create dossiers, you're really going to be creating visually appealing and informative dossiers very easily. There is built-in formatting and logical organization that you don't have to worry about, like you have to create. You will be able to do those things right out of the bat. Like it does all of these sizing for you, and with very minimal effort on your part, makes a very appealing looking dossier so that you don't have to worry about, does it look nice, when I really want to just present my data. I want to consume my information. So I get, that side benefit of a nice looking dossier while also being able to present it. But not only does it look nice, but we also have a lot of diversity, a lot of functionality. So we have things like panel stacks that came out in 2021, where you can layer your information. You have freeform layout, so you can create infographic style dossiers, and you don't have to worry about, well, it doesn't quite look the right way because I have these sections, right? You can decide how you want to build it. Plus, there's a ton of functionality with filters. So if you're looking more from the side perspective of like, how do I create different presentations on my data? We have a lot of filters, selectors, a lot of derived objects that you can use so that what you want to see, there's a lot of flexibility in that. And then to top it all off, you can also use custom visualizations. So if there's a visualization that best presents your information, you can incorporate it. Now, these dossiers, in spite of having all these different features, are very easy to use. Anyone can use them, from your most casual users to your most experienced users to your data scientists, all the range, right? And it could be useful for everyone. So if you just barely look at different types of visualization, again, with that built-in formatting, you get a nice looking dossier. But if you're more sophisticated and you really want to pull out on the data and you want to create something very, very specific, branded almost, you can do that as well. Now, where are dossiers available? Well, the great thing about dossiers is they're available everywhere. You can view them through your browsers. You can view them on your mobile devices. You can download them to have a personal one. They can be opened up in any interface. And that's the other thing, they can be opened up in multiple interfaces. So you can view them in library, which is our consumable interface with collaboration that we were talking about earlier, so that you have that communication with other users in real time. You can do it on Workstation, which is a local installation on your machine, both on Windows machines and on Macs, and you can view them there, edit them, create new ones, okay, all from your local machine. And you can also view them in our MicroStrategy app, which is also a local installation on your machines, but it allows you to really enhance the offline version so that you can consume information without necessarily being connected at all times. So everywhere on multiple interfaces. So you're creating your dossier, and now you want to know, well, what are some things that I need to keep in mind? So these are some top tips. These are, of course, don't cover everything that you could do in a dossier, or even all the things that we want to make sure that you know about, which is why we're going to talk about education at the end. But these are some top tips that what we have found as people are using dossiers. These are the things that we want you to know so that you have a really successful implementation of these dossiers and be able to use them right out of the bat. So first tip is going to be our use fewer data sets. So within dossiers, you can use any data set. You can use data sets that you've imported. You can use data sets from your own environment, like the project objects that you have. You can use your intelligent cubes that are in your environment, any combination of them. But what we recommend is to be very aware of what data sets you're using. What we want our customers to know is that when you are creating your dossiers, fewer data sets help to maintain that high performance. So when you are creating your dossiers and you have 5 data sets or more, you might start seeing some performance simply because what is happening is that your data sets are being combined and they're creating what's known as a virtual data set. And when you create that virtual data set, it will be used for your visualizations in your dossier. So it is recommended that you have between 1 to 5. 5 to 10 is okay, but anything more than that, we know that it starts to affect your performance. So we highly recommend to use fewer data sets. Even if they're larger, fewer data sets is going to be more optimal for performance. So that's our first tip. Our second tip is, how are you going to add your data into your dossiers, in memory or live dataset selection? So when you are pulling data into a dossier or pulling it from an external source into your intelligence server, you have two options. You can either connect live or import as an in-memory dataset. What we have found is that depending on your data set size, the in-memory option is really going to be the best performance. It's going to give you the best performance because it's going to be in memory. So we highly encourage you to use the in-memory as much as you can. And very aware, memory is always a limitation that we have, right? So as much as we can, use the in-memory option. And then when we have very large data sets or there are other circumstances, then consider the connect live to our data sources. But try to reduce the times that we use the connect live so that we're not affecting the performance of our dossiers because we're having to go to the data source to pull in the data. The next recommendation is to use fewer derived objects. Now, when I was talking about the fact that we have the ability to do all these manipulations, I mentioned derived objects because one of the things that we want to keep in mind is that this feature is here for your benefit, right? And I love derived objects. It's a great way to be able to prepare or to manipulate my data when I don't have it in quite the right way. What we want you to keep in mind, though, is that when you do a derived object, it is happening after your data has been pulled. And now the analytical engine, as part of our environment, is going to be processing those derived objects. It's going to be doing those calculations. So any performance things that you were enhancing by using a queue, for example, well, that's happening after that, right? So we highly recommend that you utilize as the derived objects only in the scenarios where you don't have another option. So I'll be showing a video here, a little demo in a second, that shows you how you can do data wrangling to do the same thing that you would do in a derived object. So data wrangling is one option. Of course, creating standalone objects are another option. If you have metrics that you need, then creating them as actual metrics, putting them in your data sets, and then incorporating that into your dossier is another recommendation that we make. I don't want anyone to leave, though, thinking, oh, we don't want you to use derived objects. They're definitely there for you, derived attributes, derived metrics, but do be very aware of that performance that can occur if you have object after object after object of derived objects, especially if you're importing when you could wrangle those. So let me show you a quick demo what I mean by the wrangling and how you can do one versus the other. So let's take a look at a quick example here with employee information and how I can use data wrangling to be able to do similar actions that I can complete with derived attributes. So in this first grid here, I have my imported data as is. So I have IDs, first name, last name, address, and hire date. And so with this information, what I'm able to do is I'm able to create a derived employee attribute where I can decide which form I wish to display and then be able to hide the other forms, but combine it into one single attribute. Now, in this, I wanted to show you that there's some cases where you will have to create a derived attribute. Okay, so for example, like employment, I can create employment utilizing information from the hire date. So all I did for the employment was that I take my hire date and I created an attribute. Take the current date, the hire date, and find out the number of years. So that is how I can create that calculation. I'm not going to be able to do that in wrangling. So I still need this derived objects. Okay, so still going to use them. I'm using also for my anniversary month here, where I'm again taking the hire date, but this time I'm using the time attributes to create the month of year. So again, utilizing my derived objects. But I don't need to derive employee. I could actually, because I imported it, I can data wrangle this. I can create a single object, clean up how much information I'm bringing in, and present something more concise and not have this repeated presentation. So let's take a look. So I'm uploading again the employee data Excel file so that I can work with it by clicking in prepare data. And the first thing that I want to do is wrangle, because I do want to fix that address that I have and be able to return it the way that I want to do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by working here in address. So right away, I can split apart my zip code away from the address. So I'm just going to go, I'm going to click on address. I'm going to go to my split option. And I'm going to split after the separator, specifically the white space that's here, right after the state name and before the zip code. The next thing I'm going to do is that I want to split this 101 Main Street off of the address as well. So I'm going to take I'm going to go again to split. And I'm going to split before the separator, which is that comma, and apply. Now I do have this comma space in front of my address. So I'm going to do one final manipulation here, which is where I'm going to remove the characters that are located before my space. So basically it's just a space and the comma, and apply that. Okay, and now I have my city and state. I'm going to delete this address here, the whole column, because I don't need that. I don't want it to bring it in. And I'm going to change my names. I'm going to call this zip code. And then I'm going to call this one city state. And then that way it's clear what these guys are. All right. So now that I've got my city state, I've got my zip codes, this is now cleaned up. And I'm going to create my multi-forms. So I'm going to click apply for the changes that I've done in the script and the wrangling. And now I'm going to create the forms. So I want city and state and the zip code to be in one attribute. So I'm going to select those two, and I'm going to right click to create my multi-form attribute. That is just going to be called address. And the city state is going to be the description, and the zip code is going to be the ID. And I don't want to display the ID unless they want to see it. So the city state is the one that's going to usually display if they want to display the address. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take our first name, our ID, and our last name and create that also as a multi-form attribute. And this is going to be employee, just called employee. And then I'm going to make sure that the correct forms are displayed here in the order that I want. So I want the first name to be displayed first, so that they're in the right order. And I'll click submit. So now that I've completed all my wrangling, let's put my objects in my presentation. So I'm going to create another grid. And I'm just going to put this over here on the top. And here I'm going to start off by pulling up employees. So employee already displays my last name. So I'm just going to show you here that I can choose the different display forms that I want to use, that I want to using my grid. Maybe I want to show the first name. Maybe I just want to show the ID. I can pick those, but I only have one object versus either 3 or an additional derived object for the presentation. Then for my address, add that over here. Okay, again, by default, I have the city state, but I can also change this as well to zip code. And then because I am putting it in the right format for the address to be recognized as a location for my maps, notice that I can create the geo attributes. It has latitude and longitude brought in through the import process, because I do have it in the correct format, which is city, state, and zip code. Even though they're all combined, they're being recognized correctly there. And then, of course, I have my hire date, which continues to be a time value, right? A time attribute. So then I can use that to build out employment and anniversary month. But this is much cleaner, right? I'm going to be creating 2 more attributes. But then this up here, where I created 3 and I had additional ones that I don't want to see. So with the data wrangling, I am improving my performance by reducing how many derived objects, but I'm also cleaning up my presentation. All right, so hopefully that video allows you to see just what we can do with these derived objects, and the fact that it really allows us to have a much cleaner presentation and also have a neater way to bring in the data. It's already created, it's already formatted in the right way, so that we don't have to build so many derived objects, right? The next point is about loading chapters and pages. So this is a feature, part of our settings in Dossiers, that is made available for us to optimize our rendering. So definitely want to take advantage of this if you are building Dossiers that have quite a few pages or chapters. So when you have, a lot of pages or a lot of chapters and pages, you can decide if they're going to load up on demand, especially if you have a internal reference dossier where you're not going to be looking at every single page every time you go through it. It's not going to, guide you through the top story down to the details. It's going to be something maybe that you focus on one chapter usually. Maybe you'll change to another one, but it's not going to be something where you'll be jumping around all the time. So in those cases, what you can do is that you can make sure that only that one chapter that's currently being used by the user will load up. And that will just enhance your performance because the other chapters aren't loading until they click on it, right? So this is going to be part of the dossier properties in your dossiers. Definitely want to take advantage of that when you are building up your presentations, your dossiers, okay? And you could do that for either chapters or with pages, depending on, what the amount of data is or how you've designed your dossier. Which then brings us to the last point, which is designing with intent. So one of the things that we want everyone to be aware of is that when you are building your dossiers, you have out of the box logical formatting, right? Which is or logical organization, which is your chapters and your pages. You don't have to create that. It's already part of the tool. It automatically starts to help you organize your presentation. So always want to keep that in mind. You want to leverage that functionality, but you also have the contextual linking. So contextual linking allows you to connect within the same dossier or with other dossiers to continue a story. And that organization, you want to leverage that in order to make sure that you're not overloading a single dossier to create more interesting ways to navigate through a dossier. Those are all going to be really great things. Yep. So let's take a quick look at a video that we have as well here. So to talk a little bit more about designing with intent, let's take a look at one of the dossiers that we have available both in our demo.microstrategy.com page, the one that I'm on right now, and also in our education sandbox. So here you can see it's called Retail 2021. And what I've done is I have opened it up and saved a personal copy in my reports. So this is not mine. I did not create this, but this one is available for us to kind of play around with in education so that we can see different techniques. And so there's a lot of things in here that are really neat, and about the new features of things that we can do, and how we can design our presentation. But what I'd like to show you is that it isn't just about the objects and how we're placing them, right? Foundationally, it is also about how we organize our information. So we have here under our contents, in our contents area, our product information with an overview page as I scrolled through that showed us how our company did. And then we can go into more depth and more detail as we go through each of these pages. But the design was made not just for how could you navigate in our web, in our web interface in MicroStrategy, but also what would be a cool way to present this to the users if they're working in the library interface. So instead of going to our chapters and table of contents over here on the left, we could navigate using this little sidebar, right? So if I'm going through and I'm looking at the overview and then I say, oh, I want to look at how we did in performance, I can utilize that bar here that's based upon the same idea of a clearly defined, chapters with different pages telling a story. But now I can display it on the side. So designing with intent, designing with our audience in mind, and really keeping in mind how they might use this tool. But then we can go one step further and we can utilize contextual links. Now, these are contextual links here on the side, but they can be more than just a link to another page. We can also use links within visualization. So if, as I'm hovering over this number, notice that I have this negative 2 million, right? And if I want to know how was this value broken down by in the performance, how, by my items, by my cities, I can view the performance breakdown by the month. And so by selecting this value, um, this little window pops up and I can go to that dossier. So I'm just going to click on that and go to performance breakdown by month and click on that little hyperlink there. And now I'm going to a details page that shows me my cities, my item categories, the different revenues that I had. And then it's going to be filtered by my month, in this case, month June. Okay, but that is coming from that page, that performance page with that contextual link. And so if I want to go back to that previous page, I can do it and navigate back to my performance breakdown by month, but I had that option to view that more detailed information. So designing with intent really what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're taking advantage of the built-in navigation of our chapters and our pages, and also leveraging the filtering, the contextual linking, the capabilities within our visualizations to do different displays, always with our audience in mind, right? With an end goal, with a presentation, with an interface. How do we want our users to interact with our dossiers? All right, so hopefully that video showed you a little bit about what we can do when we're designing with intent, and just touched on the first two, right? The first two things that we want to keep in mind, the chapters and the pages, and how we can leverage contextual linking to help us with navigation. And then later on also with passing over answers. So what we're going to do now is that we're going to take a look at some troubleshooting best practices for your dossiers. And Stephanie is going to take this one on. So I'll be handing over the presentation to her.
Thank you so much, Anahi, for this great insight into dossier capabilities and best practices. I'm going to cover the troubleshooting best practices. So regarding troubleshooting with dossiers, despite applying best practices, as presented by Anahi just now, we have seen performance-related issues, and with that, the need to know how to go about this and where these issues might be coming from. So in the next few slides, I will be going to focus on exactly that and what questions to ask, how to best identify the bottleneck for any slow performance, what tools to use, and summarize what info to collect for MicroStrategy Support to help identify the performance issue. So if we go to the next slide. So for us in support, it is always key to ask the correct questions, right? In order to verify the exact issue experience. So for performance, we need to know, is performance generally slow? So if yes, needs probably a tuning, sizing exercise in order to identify slowness in the environment generally. So if not, it is really, is it due to specific actions that take a lot of time? So is it just maybe just dossier executions, or is it generally browsing, report documentation, document execution, startup or shutdown? So it's very important to determine these exact actions and also determine if these same actions are consistently slow. So if it is a dossier, are all dossiers slow or only a specific one? So that's also very important to identify. And also important is to know what is the expectation, right? What is too slow? Is it very, it is a very subjective it is very subjective. So is a 2-minute long execution of a dossier okay or not? Is everything expected to run in under 10 seconds or less? Whatever it is important to gather this info and to have a clear understanding so that we as in support get the whole picture and know how to approach the right troubleshooting. So once we're clear, it is indeed concerning a specific dossier, doing some very specific steps. For example, the initial execution of the dossier is very, very slow. What do we need to gather to identify the bottleneck for the slowness? So this is what I'm briefly going to touch on now. So if we go to the next slide. Here we see a very, very simplified version of the components that make up a MicroStrategy environment. And any of these could, of course, be the performance culprit. So we have the browser or the client machine. We have the web server, application server, the iServer, and network components between them. There's, of course, the connection to the metadata and data warehouse from the iServer as well. That could be the culprit for slow performance. However, we will not focus on that here in this presentation, but we'll only present tools to use and info to collect for the other four. So browser, web server, whereby we will focus on MicroStrategy Web in this case and not library, and iServer. Yeah, next slide. So here an overview of common performance issues for the components involved. So for the for the browser, it might be a lack of resources. It could be also the static content might be very large to render, and hence a lot of time is spent on the browser side. Or it could be browser extensions, add-ons that can impact performance. Hence, we often ask to test with different browsers to exclude any specific browser issue, or also disable add-ons, extensions, and so on. So for the web server, again, lack of resources. So resource consumption is key here. And we also need to check whether, well, is there enough memory? And then in comparison to what the Java heap size is being set to, and that might need to be adjusted. And anything within the web deployment, for example, particular customizations might also influence slow behavior. For the iServer, common performance issues might lead to hang or memory depletion, or within a cluster, it might be one node performing different to another. So this all are very, very examples of issues that might be encountered. So let's go to the next slide to see what tools we can use to check where the issue might be and what we need to collect. So for the browser and client machine, browser performance can depend on a few things, one being available resources. So this can be checked by the task manager. Before executing the object, launch task manager, take a baseline recording of the CPU and RAM usage, and then launch your affected dossier and then observe exactly that usage again, whether it changes over time. So of course, generally, same browser operating on a system with low resources will generally perform slower than if we were operating on a system with high resources. Further, for the browser, we can profile the workflow via Fiddler or any network trace enabled via the browser developer tools. With this, we can profile the size of the content it is trying to render. And the network tab will show us the amount of data transferred and the size of the individual dependencies of a web page. So for the network, generally Fiddler or any other network trace is super helpful in identifying the timing of the HTTP requests and responses. And if we see a very long delay within the network, this will need to be checked outside of MicroStrategy with the network admin. So if we now look at the next component, the web server, the term web server means different things in different contexts. So technically, we have the MicroStrategy web server as a system that comprises of the HTTP server, application server, whereby, for example, Tomcat, as an example, is an application server that also acts as its own HTTP server, right? And then we have the MicroStrategy web software or the application and the machine where these components are installed. So because all requests pass through all of these components, we need to keep in mind the factors that each of these might contribute to performance. So what is important to enable and collect? Resources, of course. Again, task manager is important to check and see how the machine is performing. Performance counters can be very useful here as well. Together with this, we can also check the logging, so the application logs, server logs, and also our MicroStrategy web logs for any hints of memory issues. For example, Java heap size might be depleted and might need to be increased. So Java heap size is often asked to be increased for better performance of certain actions or in times of high concurrency. So one should make sure to size the Java heap appropriately to take advantage of the machine's resources to the fullest. Another great tool and info to get are the web statistics enabled on the web admin page under diagnostics. And the times for every action through MicroStrategy Web will get logged to this log. And this can really be helpful to identify where the time is spent, whether it is on the web server or iServer, hence also important to check for the iServer side as well. And for the iServer, again, resources are key and need to be monitored. So performance counters can be very useful and should be enabled if there's any issues suspected on the iServer side, as they can definitely help us to check if any resources are reaching their limit. So if it is not clear and we suspect the issue to be between web and iServer, we can enable advanced logging on web as well as iServer to better identify and debug API issues and to get more info on the XML command set sent and received and the time spent here. So if you now go to my last slide, where all the important info to be collected is summarized. So again, in order to best be able to identify and for us in support help identify a performance issue, we would need to collect all this information. So very important is Fiddler or any other network trace, task manager output, or any output that shows resource consumption, and of course best to get this from all components involved. And as said before, if network trace indicates slowness within the network, this needs to be brought up with the network admin. Further from web server side, web statistics, web logs, our MicroStrategy web logs from within the deployment, but also application server logs, any error logs, as well as access logs are very useful to see the exact timings and so on. And from the iServer, of course, the DSS errors logs are always needed. And if necessary, we might ask for the advanced XML API logs as well. So generally, well, performance is very hard to troubleshoot as it is very often environment specific. And even if all the Dossier best practices are in place, all the ones that Anahi also presented earlier, however, the Dossier is still showing a slow execution and we cannot really clearly identify any of the components at fault. We will try to get the Dossier in-house for further analysis and performance reproduction. And that can be either as an MSTR file, or we might ask for an object manager package with cubes or caches. So this was the brief overview for troubleshooting best practices. I guess next up is the technology roadmap for Dossier. So I'm handing over to Trent. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks so much, Stephanie. So again, yeah, my name is Trent Hyland, and I'm on the product management team here at MicroStrategy. And I want to take you through, at a high level, the direction that we're planning on going for Dossier for the next year. So we have a series of visualizations, new out-of-the-box visualizations, as well as enhancements to our formatting experience. So starting on the left, we're really focusing a lot on making sure that the visualizations that you add are looking great out of the box. So we have a series of enhancements to our label positioning, giving you more flexibility on how you want to position your labels, as well as just making sure, again, that those labels are rendering in the most appropriate way at default. So you don't have to go through that extra formatting work to make sure that they're looking great. We're also introducing some options to make formatting simpler. So one piece of that is we did a complete overhaul of our existing format panel to really make sure that all of the most important settings that you need to change are in a very discoverable layout and don't have multiple entry points that could lead to confusion. We're also planning on introducing templates to Dossier. And the way templates will work is basically you can construct a page that has no data in it, and then you can reuse that in the same way that you might use a template in, for example, a Word document when you're starting a Word document. And so this is going to reduce a lot of time that is taken to rebuild visualizations and construct pages. You can just have that default template and use that as the starting point and add your data to it. We're also planning on adding new visualizations out of the box. So for example, here we have a gauge chart, a Gantt chart, which is used for project management type applications, and a time series visualization. And we're planning on continually adding new visualizations as we move forward to continue to add the diversity of things you can do with MicroStrategy right out of the box. Another area that we're focusing on is something I like to call application workflows. So what does application workflows mean? Well, really what I mean by application workflows is making Dossier a cohesive, directed, and seamless experience for end users. So there's a couple pieces that are involved in that. One is enhancing our linking capabilities. So when you're talking about these types of workflows, being able to link to other enterprise resources is a really vital piece of functionality. So in these linking improvements, one big one we have is being able to enable one-click linking with context. So what that means is you'll be able to add a link to an object that could be a graph, it could be a grid, it could be even an image. And with just one click, you'll be able to go to that other dossier, passing all the context from the page to that dossier. So that includes any filtering conditions you have in the filter panel, any in-canvas filters that you have, passing that context as well. And so it really allows you to create these linked applications in Dossier. Another area we're improving is our filtering capabilities. So some examples of the types of things that we're planning on doing are enabling locking filters in library. So being able to, as an author, set a filter that's unchangeable for end users or hidden for end users. Being able to upload files of filter conditions. So you can imagine if you're a retailer, maybe you have 2,000 UPC codes and you want to filter on 200 of them. It's very time consuming to go through and select those 200 codes. So being able to just upload a file that has those already and have those apply is going to save you a lot of time. And then another area here is info windows. So we have just a quick demonstration of what info windows will look like. But as you can see here, basically info windows, if you're not familiar with them, are really advanced contextual tooltips. So in Dossier, what that will mean is you can basically add anything to an info window that you would have in a Dossier canvas, and they'll render really quickly as you hover or click on a data point and allow you to get some additional context on that data while using the same screen real estate. So it's a really powerful piece of functionality. And the last piece I'll talk about is some major expansions we're doing to our grids. So we're introducing something called, we're basically rebuilding our grids from the ground up. So if you look on the left here right now, this is a demonstration on the performance. On the left is our existing grid. Our existing grid does pretty well with large amounts of data, but as you can see in the scrolling, there was some loading time there. On the right here is our new grid. And as you can see, this Dossier has something like 10,000 rows in it, and it's just scrolling completely seamlessly. And that's just one example of the types of improvements that this new grid is going to have. We're also going to be including a lot of Excel-like capabilities and so much more that's really going to add a lot of value to your grids in Dossier. One piece of that new grid that I want to call out in more detail is microcharts. So if you're not familiar with microcharts are small visualizations. They're designed to fit within a single cell. And they're really useful for looking at trends across categories. So you can really consume a large amount of data by just looking at quickly at these microcharts. So we'll support 3 microcharts out of the box at the start. That would be spark lines, trend bars, and bullet charts. And you'll be able to use that just in conjunction with this new grid and all the other capabilities there. So really excited about that. And then last, but certainly not least, is that we are planning on adding transactions to our Dossier grids. So if you've used our RSDs, report, which are report service documents, you might be familiar with transactions capabilities, which is basically our database write back capabilities. It's definitely very popular amongst our customer base there. And what this will be able, you'll be able to do with this in Dossier is not only write back to databases, but also to web services. And we'll have support for things like Python scripting. So you can take a lot of actions with just a single click on your grid. For example, obviously there's the database write back use case, but also maybe you want to send an email. You want to write a Python script that will send an email when you click on a button based on the emails that you have in your grid in that row. So you'll be able to do that with these transactions capabilities. So extremely exciting new capabilities there. And that's all I have for the high level roadmap. And with that, I'll hand it back to Nahi.
Thank you, Trent. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what we have in education concerning dossiers, so that if you are new to dossiers and a lot of the things that we were talking about, you really want to find out more about them and what we can do. We have some courses for you guys. So this screenshot, this first one here, just shows us the full catalog that we have available, our courses and our certifications. So if you are interested in being certified with MicroStrategy, we have over 10 certifications that you can take that are recognized across the industries, so that we can show that you know how to use the product, right? And so we have a breakdown of our courses into how they fit into the certifications, and you can take the courses in order to be able to complete those certifications across our different learning paths. We do have two learning paths. We have an analyst pass and we have an architect pass. Basically, the analyst pass is our top most used courses in the areas of analysis, data science, and customization. So if you're looking for those top, courses that you can take, if you want to start off there, you can do the analyst pass. Our architect pass, though, will have all of our catalog. So if you want to learn from not just the basic analysis, but also want to go much deeper dives into like the workstation and administration tasks and more customization features that are available within MicroStrategy, definitely want to check out the Architect Pass because that will give you our entire catalog access. Now, specifically for dossiers, if you are interested in viewing what are the two classes that you can learn how to use dossiers, it's going to be our dashboarding with dossiers and visualizations class, which is part of the analyst pass, and it is part of the ANL track for certification. And then we have the advanced dashboarding with dossiers, which is part of our architect pass and also part of our architect certification, which is the MCA. Now, both of these courses are covering the usage of dossiers from first year, just how do you begin to use a dossier, the most basic features, the chapters and pages, that kind of thing. And then in the advanced dashboarding, that's when you start getting into advanced filters, contextual links, derived objects that we were talking about. That's going to be in the advanced dashboarding with dossiers. So we do have basic topics, more advanced topics divided up between these two. And as new features are added, all the features that Trent was talking about, we in education add those things into our courses. So you will see them as they start coming into the product. Definitely want to check out our main homepage, microstrategy.com, if you are interested in kind of seeing what is new to MicroStrategy, what is new to our dossiers. We always talk about those. We make videos and stuff for you guys to check those out. And of course, webinars are a great way to access that kind of information as well. Now, in the same main page of microstrategy.com, there is an education page. So if you're interested in, signing up for courses, you already have a pass and you haven't signed up for courses, definitely want to do that. In the education page, you can sign up for our courses. If you don't have them, if you don't have a pass and you want to get one, all the information about the passes are also on our education page. And if you want to talk to somebody, please feel free to email us. Our links are all in there, our phone numbers, our emails for education are there as well. So definitely, education is a great way to get introduced. We have a sandbox for you guys to play around with dossiers online, and it's always up to the newest version as well. So any new features, you don't have to wait until you internally have them or even until you're in a class. Our sandbox will be updated. In fact, that's where I did all my demos for this webinar. So it's all going to have all the coolest, newest features for you guys. So now it's time for Q&A, and I'm going to pass it back to Carol, who will take care of that.
Thank you, Anahi, and thank you, guys. Thank you all, Stephanie, Anahi, and Trent, for this wonderful content. And let's kick it off, our Q&A session. Okay, so let's start with the first question that we have that is probably linked to the next question. And the question is from Evgeny. Will the dossier in MicroStrategy library, be automatically scaled to fit the screen as a document? And I think it is linked to the next question because Evgeny is asking about the big difference in the dossier on Android versus the iOS and if it's going to be eliminated. Trent, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So for the first part of that question, yeah, I'm not sure if I'm totally answering the question, but I think the answer to that is yes. I mean, dossiers are responsive, so they will change their layout based on the screen size they're being viewed on. And there's a lot of features that you can take advantage of in Dossier today that allow you to ensure that your dossier will look good no matter what screen size it's viewed on. And you can actually you can actually define certain there's responsive breakpoints and all kinds of things that you can look into to make sure that your dossiers are looking good when responsive. To the second part of that question about Android and iOS, for that piece, we're actively working on eliminating that discrepancy, but I can't give any guidance as to what that will look like and when that process will be completed.
Thank you, Trent. All right, our next question is about the data sets. Ben is asking us, what is the recommended size or sizes of data sets for best performance? And Ahi, would you like to answer this question?
Yes. So when it comes to data sets, the sizing of your data sets is really dependent within your environment. So as big as you can make them is really, it's going to be separate from the idea within a dossier. So let me just quickly break down what I mean by that. So let's say that I have a cube, and within my environment, I'm able to make this a fairly large cube, millions of rows, and I can still have high performance. As long as I only use that one cube in my dossiers, my data set is good, right? Because I'm not having to create what I was talking about, this virtual data set where I'm combining multiple data sets. And that's key. So the performance on the data set itself is going to be, it's going to be great because I've already tested it. I've already made sure that it's running great. And I'm just using it now as my data source for my dossiers. So the only next thing that's going to happen is the building up the visualizations within the dossier. So one data set, even if it's large, it's great. It's when we start adding multiple data sets that if they're both very large, they're having to combine. They're having to create that virtual data set. And that's where you start to see those issues of performance, right? Because of the combination, they're having to join together all the attributes and pull it in the virtual data set and put all the metrics in there and then present it into the dossier. That's where you start to see those issues. So it's always recommended if you can combine as much as you can in your data sets, combine them as much as you can, especially like into a single cube, being that the optimal method of using a data set within a dossier, that's going to be the best performance you can get. Can you always do that? No, right? So you do have the ability to do the combinations. Just keep in mind that your data sets, you want to make sure that they're both any number of data sets that you have, they have to all run really, really well, so that you will, have the best performance when they get into that create that virtual data set and move forward. Hopefully that answers your question. It's not really about the number, like this is the size that it has to be. It's more about in general, like how well performing are the data sets from the get-go, and then seeing how many you have.
And to piggyback on this, what is the difference between using a data set built from a cube and an in-memory data set selection? And which is the better option? Option 1, pointing your dossier to a data set that is pointing to a cube. Or option B, pointing your dossier straight to the cube.
So what I'm hearing from here is always I have a cube at it. I have a cube. So if you have a cube, that request is not going to your like a database or a file or something like that, right? It's already in memory. So creating a report off of a cube or pointing straight to the cube should not give you very much in difference in performance. Like you should have the same level of performance. Maybe I can pass this one over to Stephanie as well if she's seen anything where that's not the case. But because you already have a cube, that's already helping you to improve performance. And in fact, it's one of the techniques that we talk about in administration classes, for example, about how to improve your performance, optimizing your performance is utilizing the cubes option within MicroStrategy to decrease your requests and calculations of your data because you already have done that in the cube.
Thank you, Anna. So just to summarize it, basically, it's better to use cubes if you don't want to wait on your database to get the data from it, to fetch the
Right.
data. So cubes are just very helpful to decrease that waiting time, right?
Right. Yeah. Yep.
Thank you. All right. Our next question is whether data wrangling increases the cube refresh time.
So data wrangling is a calculation that's going to happen when you import data, and it is going to manipulate that information. So it shouldn't add, it shouldn't really add that much to the refresh time, because the manipulations that are happening, as you saw, they're like splitting a column, combining a column. They're really just making basic manipulations of the presentation, but they're not really doing any kind of calculations. They're not creating, they're not really like creating anything besides just like changing the numbers, right? Because you can modify the content, you can change the values, but other than that, there's no calculation that's occurring. So you should not see any measurable effect to your refresh when you do a data wrangling. And in fact, what you should see is an improvement to just your overall presentation. So anything that, if you wrangle it versus not wrangling it, the end result will be more efficient and with the data wrangling versus not having wrangle it and then having to clean it up somehow in your dossier in some other fashion. So overall, I think whether to wrangle or not to wrangle, I would say wrangle, always vote on the wrangling side to help your overall dossier look and performance and so on.
All right. And now we will move on to our top 5 tips. And the question is, tip 1 is to reduce data sets. Tip 2 is to use smaller data sets. Tip 3 is to use fewer derived objects. And now the question is, should we not use dossiers for large data sets or ones that allow for self-service?
So I would say definitely want to use, so yes, that seems to be the impression, right? That we're saying don't use large data sets. But like Stephanie was saying, performance is subjective, right? What you feel like is not good performance might not be what my definition is of not good performance. So if you're using a large data set and you're willing to accept a 15-second, 30-second delay into the loading time, even with loading chapters on demand. And you've established that you've done some other techniques to improve your performance, and it's still taking about 30 seconds to load up, and you're okay with that, then that's fine, right? Because it's a very large data set and we're going to be patient and we're going to accept that. But if I'm looking at it, I'm saying, oh, no, I want 5 seconds, then that's not good enough for me, right? So we might have different definitions of what is a great loading time. Once you're in it, though, it might be that, that's not going to be, once it loads, you're good. And it's not going to really affect the moving forward or analyzing it. So I would say just keep in mind what your idea is of good performing and make sure that you're hitting that standard, and taking into account that the larger it is, you will have some kind of effect. Okay, we have to be realistic about that. But we have different techniques to improve the performance, and in no way, shape, or form would I want you to think that having a large data set means that no, you shouldn't use a dossier, because we do have those techniques to improve the performance that we can take advantage of and we can do. Just keep in mind that the more data sets we have, the larger they are, there will be an effect, and we can plan for that, and we can make sure that everybody's kind of on board with that performance.
Thank you, Anahi. Okay, and now I think this is a question to Trent. Trent, is on-demand chapters and pages loading available in MicroStrategy 2020?
I actually am not sure if I'm the best person to answer that. I'm not entirely sure. about whether or not it's available in 2020.
Okay. And Ahi, maybe
I think it was,
what?
yeah, sorry. I think it was available in 2020 update 4. I want to say that that's the case. The later versions of 2020. It wasn't started in 2021. It was, at least the loading chapters was, loading pages was in 2021. I'm pretty sure. So
Okay,
because there's
so
2 parts. Yeah,
right. So chapters were the first ones, and they were available in 2020 update 4. I mean, loading them
pretty
on
sure.
demand, and pages in MicroStrategy 2021.
Yes, I'm fairly sure. I'm fairly sure
Okay.
that that's the case.
Okay. Thank you. And again, about the loading chapters and pages on demand option, what does loading mean? Does this mean that each page or chapter is going back to the database to retrieve the data when this option is checked?
So what it means is that it's the presentations, the visualizations aren't displaying, aren't being held in memory. So you start your dossier. If everything were to load up at the same time, the data set would be, of course, always has to be loaded. And then the visualizations all are available with all of their data. But with the loading on demand, that means that the visualizations are pulling the data to present it until they're requested. Okay, so if you change to another page, you will see that slight delay because it hasn't pushed that into the memory to be able to be seen.
All right. And now, as a very specific question to the demo, the second demo that you presented, Anahi, how can we access that dossier that was shown in the demo for the design with intent? Is it available out of the box in the MicroStrategy tutorial?
It's not available out of the box with tutorial. It's available in our sandbox. And if you don't have access to the sandbox because you currently don't have a pass, it's in demo.microstrategy.com. So if you do a quick Google input, demo.microstrategy.com, that will send you to our MicroStrategy library where we show a lot of demos of our dossiers in library, and you can check out that feature. And it's going to be scrolling down. It's about halfway through. That particular dossier is there, along with a lot of other ones. So if you're interested in like basketball, Kobe Bryant dossier is in there. We always start, as an organization, we're adding dossiers in there so you can see what the newest features are and so on. But if you have our education sandbox, they're in our 2021 dossiers folder. That's not out of the box with tutorial. Don't think that one's shipped out. But you can, if you're in education, you can view it there and then you can manipulate it. You can go in there and see how it was built, take it apart, try new things, and so on.
Okay, I think that dossier caught an eye of some other attendees today. So the question is the sidebar a specific visualization? This is the one that we saw on the right-hand side of that dossier. And how can you build that?
So that particular one is a great feature that is available because of the freeform layouts, and that came out in 2021. So freeform layout allows us to add in images, and to space them wherever we want, and to add shapes as well. So if you go to the sandbox and the education sandbox, you can actually see how the objects are being built. But basically what they did was they put images on top of a bar, I think it's another image bar that's there. And then they put the links on those images. The way we talk about how to do all these pieces in the advanced dashboarding with Dossier's class. So if you have or pass, it's in the architect classes. We do talk about how to use that freeform layout option, how to do the contextual linking in those classes, and break down how how those pieces work. Also, if you have the education sandbox and you want to do the recordings, we also have that out there, so you can learn how those things are coming together. Now, if you don't have either, you can also watch, I think there's some videos out on our MicroStrategy page from our World Series that show like the different things that we've done. They don't break it down quite as much as we do in education from like a training perspective, but you can kind of see how the pieces are coming together.
Awesome. Okay. Our next question is, if there's a way to load data incrementally, I think that we are talking here about the cubes, but Anahi, would you mind to address this question?
Incrementally into, so there's ways to update your intelligent cubes and add data incrementally. That depending on what type of cube you're doing, right? If it's a data import cube, or if it's a in project objects cube, you do have those features available where you can update the data, or you can like update insert, for example, importing, or if the project objects, there's like a ways that you could request new information and just update parts of it. Okay, and we do talk about those again in our classes because they're broken down a little bit differently. But if it's talking about incremental fetch within dossiers, I don't know if this is a reference to like documents. That is currently not in dossiers. We don't have incremental fetch on the visualizations, unless I'm wrong. And maybe I have to pass this off to Trent if he can answer that one. But yes, you do have incremental fetch for the data sets in the cubes.
Yeah, we have incremental fetch for grids. I don't know about other visualizations, but especially for grids, if you have like 10,000 rows, makes sense to have it. So we do support that. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. In the properties of your grids.
Okay. Now a couple of questions about the capabilities in dossiers and the features. So currently dossiers are not opened in presentation mode by default in MicroStrategy Web. So either a user has to click on the presentation mode manually or right click and run it in library, which is not a seamless experience for a business user. So can we either make it default to run as the presentation mode in web, or by default click on the dossier in web and then it will open in the library in a new tab. And this will avoid manual right click or additional clicks for the users.
Yeah, I can take this one. So I would recommend your business users just start from the library interface instead of starting from web, and then it will just open in library, and you won't have to go through the process of opening it in web and then opening it in library.
Right. Thank you, Trent. Okay, and now something about the sizing of the dossiers. But the actual sizing of the layout. Okay, so can we enhance the page size to include the width as well? This way we can use the background images more precisely in a dossier. Trent, would you mind taking this one?
Yes. Yeah, I can take this one. So that's feedback we've heard before. It's something we are actively investigating. It's not planned for this year, but it's something we're looking at for the future.
Oh, great. So it's in our future roadmap. Awesome. Okay, and in panel stacks, we do not have the option to move or copy visualizations to or from pages. So once a visualization is created in the panel stack, and if we want to move it out of the panel stack and place it on a different page on the page, we have to redesign that visualization from scratch. It's time consuming. So what can we do about it to make it a little bit easier? Trent, do you have some ideas how to do that?
Yeah, it's definitely valid feedback. There's not anything on our roadmap currently to address that due to just some technical limitations. But we'll take that feedback back and see if we can't do anything.
Thank you. Awesome. A question about our tools now. So, should I be designing my datasets in workstation or developer?
I guess just from the product management perspective, I could take that. Workstation is definitely where we will be investing in new capabilities and like modern interfaces. So I would recommend. I don't know if anyone else has any other thoughts on that.
From the perspective of just building them, I mean, developer still works. You can continue to use developer and build your data sets there if you prefer. But yes, like Trina is saying, all of the newest and fun functionality that we're adding to the product is going to be in workstation. You're not going to see those in developer. So if there's something specific, like for example, if you were importing and you were doing creating a data set, then you could use workstation, right? You can't use developer. So definitely use whichever tool you like. Just be aware that newest functionality, if you see something about building data sets, something new, it's going to be in workstation. It's not going to be in developer.
Okay. All right. So, I think that I will add something to this, that if you would like to discover the workstation capabilities, we have a wonderful webinar that was delivered last year. You can find that webinar and request access on demand to the video recording. It's available on our website. Okay, moving on with the questions. So do we have an option to duplicate formatting in the dossier, like setting control defaults in a document?
So specifically for each visualization, like the text and so on, overall, yes. So like if you go to your Dossier properties, it's in the formatting dropdown. There's a section there where you can set overall like what your font is going to be, what the background color is going to be, how the layout works, and how it does it's like the spacing, like is there like a gray area between it, just the boxes kind of show that kind of stuff. But if you're looking for more specific, like every time I open up a grid, it's going to I don't know, it's going to have this threshold on it or something like that. That won't be the case. Those kinds of more specific formatting pieces would have to be done within that specific visualization. But like if you were saying like, I want the fonts to be a certain way and the headers to always be to the left aligned, then yes, then that can be done with the Dossier, overall Dossier formatting for your visualizations. But it won't be specific to each visualization. It would be overall, all the headers do this, all the fonts look like this, that kind of stuff.
All right. And how do we add the custom threshold palette into a dossier so that we do not have to add hexadecimal codes every time and for each metric?
Maybe we can see if Trent has a roadmap on that. Unfortunately with the thresholds, you have to pick out the colors each time still.
Yeah, nothing on the roadmap specifically for that at the moment.
All right. So for now, we're going to do it manually. Okay. So there's also a question about another enhancement request. So the legend placement isn't flexible, and it should be used as the highlighter for the visualization. Is that something that trend we're planning to be more flexible about?
Yes. So something we have planned for this year is what we call like a global detachable legend. So you'll be able to move that around anywhere on the freeform canvas and be able to use it to filter visualization. So yeah, I think that will achieve what you're asking for there.
Awesome. And what about text or rich text as the visualization target from other visualizations?
Yeah, that's something we have. Excuse me. That's something we have on our roadmap to allow you to do that.
Great. Awesome. Okay. Ryan is asking us how he can find more details, more information about the features that will be available in the new grid.
Yeah, I can take that. So once we release it, it'll all be in the documentation that we release along with it. In terms of knowing before it comes out, everything that we're developing is subject to change. So we try not to preemptively release a detailed list of everything that'll be in there because things might change due to technical things or resourcing. So once it's released, you'll have full documentation on everything that is coming. And of course, webinars like this are a good way to get an idea of what will be released and the major pieces of functionality that will be a part of that.
Right, great. Okay. Our next question is, goes like this. Can we have support for triggering Python scripts from the Dossier button, which can read filter parameters from Dossier and run it in the backend and render the updated results on the Dossier? I'm not sure if Trent, you are familiar with our tools roadmap. So of course we can look into that after the webinar and supply information in our follow-up email, unless you have some information about that, Trent.
No, for a specific request like that, I think that's probably the best course of action.
Okay, so we'll supply the information in the follow-up email for this. All right. Can we double drop the same object in the visualization? This is an example. Like for dual axis synchronous bar chart, what if we want to place the same metric twice? Currently, we need to duplicate it and place it. This will create redundant objects, which are, of course, needed to be maintained additionally.
Yeah, so that's unfortunately that is the answer, that currently there's not any way to repeat a value within your visualizations without creating a derived object. I don't know if there's...
Okay, that's unfortunate, but thank you for the answer. Can we use prompts in the dossier?
Yes. Now, remember that dossiers themselves are, well, I take that back. Let me rephrase that. So when you are creating a dossier, if you want to use a prompt straight into the dossier, that's when you start to use existing objects and you can reference a filter with a prompt in it. Or if your data sets have prompts in them, like if you're using a report, if it has a prompt in it, then your dossier will be a prompted dossier because the data set itself is prompted. So yes, and we do talk about that in our advanced dossier course, where we show what different options you have within a dossier, because you can save your dossier with the answers that you want. And it's not going to be static. It's still a prompted data set, but the dossier itself holds in memory the answers. So I don't have to be prompted each time I open it. Or you could have it be prompted, or you can have it be prompted with default answers. And that is all happening on the dossier side. It's not affecting the data set, original data set with the prompts as they are.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I see a couple of very specific environmental questions. So let me pick the one that is about actually one of the things that we've been talking about today. Um, what is the maximum recommended size of the cube for better performance? Is there a maximum recommended size?
I don't know if Stephanie has a better answer than I do, but as far as like this is the size, there isn't really a like this is the size that it must be in order to have the best performance. I don't know if Stephanie has a better answer than that.
No, I don't have a better answer, but it is really, it all depends on, you know, the environment, resources, anything. And then it depends, you know, whether, well, the size doesn't really matter then. I mean, depending on how resourceful the environment is. So it's hard to tell. It's not something very, you know, it's not something we can answer just like that. And in any case, we, from support perspective, we would never be able to actually, you know, say any specific recommendations for this. No. So because it depends on so many different factors. Yeah.
Okay. And can we make freeform SQL dossiers at Acme?
So with freeform SQL, so the term freeform SQL was specifically used when we were creating like freeform SQL reports in Developer. And if you create a report in Developer, it's recognized as just a report. So you can use that definitely in your data, in your dossiers. But remember, we also have the freeform SQL option, like write your own query against the database when you do a data import as well. And then that could be used as a data set. So as long as the final result is a report or a cube object, then you can use it in the dossiers. But you can't write a freeform SQL report as an object like we do in Developer. You can't do that inside of the dossier itself, right? You can't do that in web currently either. But that particular technique is only in Developer at this time. So you'll want to continue to build your freeform SQL reports in Developer, and then you can use them just like you could within a document. You can use them in a dossier.
Okay, thank you. As we are really running over the scheduled time for this webinar, let me just pick two more questions that we'll answer right now. And for the rest of the questions, we'll provide the answers in the follow-up email that you will receive after the webinar. Okay, our two last questions are, can we add more font styles into dossiers?
I can take that real quick. I mean, we're introducing a rich text editor, which will allow you to format down to the character level. It doesn't introduce new fonts, but it does give you more like formatting flexibility with text.
Thank you. Okay, Trent, we know that you have other commitment, a customer commitment right now, so feel free to drop. Thank you very much for today.
Yeah, thanks
and
everybody.
Thank you. And we're gonna continue with one last question. Okay, contextual linking. This is something that we talked today about. So using contextual linking, can we pass the filter values from one dossier to another dossier, which contains prompt using interaction?
So yes, you can pass over filter selections. And the way that I did it in the same dossier, you know, I selected a value and it passed it over and it filtered it automatically. That can happen across dossiers. But you can also have control over prompt answers. And again, referring you back to the advanced dashboarding class, that's where we see that with contextual linking. But the answer is yes.
Thank you very much for this answer. Okay, that was the last question that we could answer right now. For the rest of the answers, please be in the lookout for the email from us after the webinar that will contain not only the answers to the rest of the questions, but also all the links that are talking about the dossier design and performance optimization in our product documentation, also some KB articles. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so I'll take this opportunity and I will thank everyone for attending this webinar session. I will thank our presenters, Stephanie, Anahi, and Trent, who needed to leave us, for their time and insight. Okay, so before we close, we just wanted to let you know about the next webinar session that we'll be hosting in case you want to save the date. And would like to encourage you to register today for our next top tips webinar, which is going to take place on June the 25th, 1 p.m. Eastern. If you want to discover MicroStrategy distribution services capabilities with our experts. And to register, you can go to this tiny URL, tinyurl.com/MSCR2021 events, or you can watch out for our registration email coming to your inbox pretty soon. Of course, you can also search for the other top tips webinars in our resource library on microstrategy.com. And the other method of, saving the date and registering now is to wait for the micro minute that we are sending out to all our customers. Okay. And please also be in the lookout for the follow-up email, again, with all the necessary information collected for this webinar and for you to reuse for your better experience with MicroStrategy dossiers. Okay, next slide, please. And I also want to let you know about an additional way that you can learn more about our platform, which is the expert.now service. If you are not familiar with the expert.now service, it is our on-demand video conferencing service that allows you to connect with our experts, to ask questions and generally just learn more about all the things in MicroStrategy. And if you want to check it out for yourselves, you can click on the expert.now button from anywhere on our website or on community to sign up for a free 30-day trial. And this trial includes access to the expert.now service as well as all 56 courses in our comprehensive education catalog that are usually only available to Architect Education Pass holders. And we've gotten really great reviews about the service, so we really, really encourage you to check this out. Okay, next slide, please. And finally, again, if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to open a support case with the support team or connect with our experts through the expert.now service. It is a really great way to connect with our leading experts and to get answers to the questions that might be on your mind about our platform. And there's one other way you can get enhanced access to our experts on a regular basis, and that is by upgrading to one of our 3 premium support plans. To learn more about it, please visit us at microstrategy.com/support. Thank you all so much, and we hope you got a lot out of today's session. You had fun, you got all the answers, and that you join us next month. Thank you.